The rocket launcher leveled with his forehead until it was all he could see. Strips of red and white blocked Techno from view, but Tubbo could imagine his face was just like it was seconds ago, twisted and remorseful. For a brief moment, Tubbo caught a glimpse of Slat's grin, his goat-like horns dark against the backdrop of the sky. Then, "I'm sorry, Tubbo." Tubbo woke with a gasp, hands flying to his head, to his skull. He tried to breathe, fingers tangling into his hair. He pulled lightly. The pain, nothing compared to the fire of the bang ringing in his ears, was that scream, red, filling his vision. Tubbo gasped weakly, heart beating wildly in his chest. Where was Tommy? Oh God, where was he? He needed someone. He needed help. Why was he alive? Tubbo blinked, trying to stay himself. He carefully removed hands from his hair, scalp burning. He was sitting in an unfamiliar field of grass, a few cows grazing in the distance. He held his breath, counting slowly. 1, 2, 3. Think. What happened? 4, 5, 6. The field felt different from any near Manberg. Any of the ones he'd been in, actually. 7, 8, 9. Had the spawn point been reset somehow? 10. Tubbo sighed shallowly, head no longer spinning. He still felt unsteady, but he felt calm enough to brush himself off and look around. He focused on breathing, on staying calm as he slowly got to his feet. He could still feel the ghost of a firework, could see red, blue, white, wherever he looked. Tubbo tried to focus. His surroundings were pretty mundane, all things considered. A forest off to the left, seemingly oak, although he could be wrong. Everywhere else was a field on all sides. Animals roamed freely, hardly paying him any mind. Tubbo allowed himself a smile. He loved animals. Wait. This field wasn't familiar. None of this was. Tubbo scanned the forests, the horizon, searching for anything, any landmarks at all. This meant his respawn had been tampered with. His bed, the one that had been enchanted for this scenario, just in case, must have been destroyed. Someone must have wanted him to die. Permanently. Tubbo slammed a hand over his mouth in his slick. Slat. Of course Slat had done this. Who else? Tubbo could still see Slat's face as he called Techno to the stage. He had been so vindictive, so gleeful. Tubbo wondered how long he planned this, for him to die. But he wasn't dead. Tubbo paused, scanning his surroundings again. This certainly didn't look like the afterlife. He glanced downward, assessing himself for the first time. His clothes were the same as what he wore at the festival, a stuffy suit tailored just for him. He'd liked this suit before everything. Sometimes he could forget what it stood for and just appreciate how good he looked in it. Other times it made him queasy. This was one of those times. He focused on something else as quickly as possible, swallowing his mounting nerves. His hands looked pristine, nails intact. Nothing like the chipped, bleeding fingers he got from scratching on the walls of the phone. Please just let me out. It was as if nothing had happened. That made sense if he'd respond, but he shouldn't have. His bed had been tampered with, or most likely had been. Had some of the enchantment continue to work miraculously? Was he just on some uninhabited corner of the world? Tubbo suddenly felt very, very small. He sighed deeply. rubbing at his burning eyes. Tubbo hardly got any sleep these past few days. This new spawn point wasn't like any he'd had before. He was isolated, alone. He didn't have Tommy to banter with or L'Manberg to feel comfortable in. He was alone in an area that might have people in it that didn't like him. Tubbo kept an eye open every night, and it was only partially because of monsters. Lone travelers were dangerous. People who lived in the countries whispered at how they'd kill you on sight, all because you might have valuables that would help with their death wish of a quest to defeat the dragon. Tubbo didn't plan on dying to any of them. It had been days, and he still hadn't heard a distant sound that could indicate human life. Instead, he fought off monsters every night, slowly gathering small cuts for his troubles. Tubbo perched in his tree, watching as a zombie stumbled past. It lurched drunkenly, and he groaned internally. Zombies were slow and stupid, yes, but there was one, there was more to come. Tubbo was really craving sleep right now, or maybe just a familiar face. Scratch that. He was definitely desperate for a familiar face. Tubbo had been traveling for weeks, avoiding random villages and larger gatherings of structures that might have been countries. He had yet to hear any other travelers, any other life form, and animals or monsters. It was lonely. It was so lonely. He couldn't find any landmarks, any rumors about Manberg, any mentions in a village about Wilbur blowing anything up, any stories about the legendary swordsman Technoblade working for a ragtag pair of exiles. Nothing. Tubbo had forgotten what it felt like to be alone. Even with Schlatt, he had Fundy, he had Quackity, Nicky, even a rat on occasion. This was different. Tubbo can feel himself changing as weeks went by. Before he relied on Tommy, on Wilbur, for resources. He was content just to work on his bees. He had his family, his friends. Why would he need to farm, to mine? Now the first thought every morning was a question. How is he going to survive to another day? How is he going to push on or to find something familiar again? Tubbo wondered if once he got back, he'd be more of a use to the rebellion than he had been before. He wasn't even in the same world. Tubbo hiccuped, face buried in his knees. His back was pressed against the secure cave wall, and a haphazard fort surrounded him. It was a false sense of security. Any time someone could come barreling in and killing him. Tubbo didn't care. He sniffled, arms wrapped around himself. He traveled for so long he lost track of the days. It had to have been more than a month. At that time he'd seen so many different biomes, scavenged so much food. He'd survived. At some point, after finally staying at a huge village for more than a day, he had to face the facts. This wasn't his home. His world. He'd never see his family again. He was dead to them. Tubbo whimpered into his knees, white noise overtaking his hearing. His eyes burned out, tears spilling onto his arms. He'd heard rumors, fairy tales of respawning magic glitching, of someone being transported to an entirely different world instead of on their bed. He never expected it to be real, much less happen to him. Tubbo bit his lip, squeezing his eyes shut. He'd never see Tommy again. He'd never see L'Manberg be taken in Patokibia's favor. He'd never see the aftermath of his execution. He'd never see how Technoblade felt about it all. He'd never see anyone he knew ever again. Nowadays, he just sung just to fill the silence of the daytime. He wasn't good at it. It'd always been Clackady's thing, but he needed something to do, something to hear. Tubbo sang of the sunlight peering through branches, silly little tunes he'd made as a kid, hidden in his cottage. Sang of a river running through a small kingdom full of hopefuls. Sang of friendship and not being alone. But when night came, he didn't sing. Instead, it was a game of hissed breath, small grunts, a strategy of smothered gasps. He was as silent as the forest in the daytime. Tubbo ran when he couldn't hide, falling into the habit of gliding over the forest floor as silent as possible. None of the monsters that kept him company ever managed to catch him until one night he spotted fire flames. It burned so bright, too bright. He stumbled, ghosts of smoke filling his lungs. He gasped, eyes blown wide. It was too familiar. Ghosts of gunpowder and fireworks burned across his senses, and he froze. An arrow hit his side with a wet thud. It was a parody of a duel he remembered from so long ago. Reminder of a friend he'd lost. A reminder that no matter how much he tried, surviving something would knock him down over and over and over again. The dry sound of clacking bones was his only warning before an arrow came and grazed his arm. He jumped into motion, trying to avoid it, trying to hide. Another arrow whizzed right by his head. Tubbo ran for the first time, not even bothering to be quiet. He ran, tears blurring his vision, memories clogging his feet.